I have been a huge fan of Mark Morton's Miraculous scales and arpeggios. I've used them ever since I started playing the bass, and I'm so thrilled that we have them available in our sheet music store. We've got that linked up in the description below, and we're going to chat with Mark about the inspiration behind these books. I'll show you how I use them in my practice to this day.
These books first came out in 1991, so I just did the math. That's 33 years ago. And this was pre-finale for me anyway. So I sat down and I wrote everything out by hand. I mean, it's very quaint, I suppose. But of course, now this version are all done in finale, so they're much easier to read. As you know, there was a hiatus when we did have the books available, and it was because my printer doubled the price of production. And I thought, and then on top of that, I could see that the world was going to a paperless society. And so it took me some time to reformat these books. And I also thought, I'm not going to charge bass players twice as much for exactly the same product. So I wanted to wait until I had a better product. And this version is better in a number of ways. Number one, it's professionally typeset, and so it's easier to read.
Let's dive into Miraculous scale fingerings for the double bass now in its third edition, and I love that Mark includes Spanish in the preface. Very cool to open this up to more people.
My summer camp that was called the American School of Double Bass. Well, the American School of Double Bass lives on through these materials. And when I first started coming to Latin America, they said, we're America also. And, from the United States perspective, we don't really realize that so much. And so I like the idea of the American School of Double Bass really including all of the Americas. So next I need to translate it into Portuguese.
This is a comprehensive book, folks. So you've got major, natural minor, harmonic minor, melodic minor, chromatic, whole tone, diminished, pentatonic, a couple of variations, and blues scale. And I am so guilty of just getting stuck practicing major or maybe natural minor scales. So to have this laid out with the fingerings is really, really helpful. And starting on E, we've got the 1 octave. So we start off, we go open, 1, then 2. We are going to shift 4, 1, 4, 1, 2. If I take the bottom fingering, now we do it a second time with a slightly different fingering. So for the open notes, that is the closed hand fingering, and he's giving you 2 variations. He calls this his binary system of fingering, or a binary system of fingering, which makes a lot of sense. Just 2 notes, 2 notes, 2 notes.
I didn't want to give too many possibilities so that people would get overwhelmed. So as you correctly pointed out, there's really 2 basic approaches to the fingerings, and as the binary system where you play 2 notes per position and shift every other note. And then the other vastly different approach to fingering, which uses more efficient fingerings, not always open hand. It includes open hand, but we'll use open strings, we'll minimize the shifts. And so I call those the fast fingerings. Of course, it's very impractical to play very quickly 2 notes per position. It's shifting every other note. Although once you learn this skill, the binary system, it becomes pretty natural, and you'll be surprised at how quickly you can play, even in the binary system. About the binary system, that germ of that idea really came from my teacher at Juilliard, David Walter. I got to give him credit. He gave me that idea.
If we get into the middle fingering, are when the shift happens. And then he gives you an open fingering. So in this particular case, we're going to start here, and then we go up to do third finger. And once you get into this position on the bass, the neck block position, and there are many numbers and names for this position. And if you're not familiar with it, D to F might seem a little bit wide, but Mark points something really interesting out about spacing on the bass and how it works.
I've actually done the measurement on a 42-inch string length to reach from a D to an F. It's 113 millimeters. A flat to B flat is 111 millimeters. If you can reach A flat to B flat, give me just 2 more millimeters and you got that minor third in D position.
Then we get into thumb position. Then a variation. Again, for these closed hand fingerings that he always starts out with, it's all about playing 2 notes, 2 notes, 2 notes. Then he gives you an open hand fingering, starting with the thumb on the E. And that might seem a little bit unusual if you're used to starting with your thumb on the G octave, but like Mark points out, there are all sorts of great use cases for taking the thumb back and moving it around the bass and using it in these lower positions.
The thing about the thumb position is that it can be used really literally anywhere on the bass. It doesn't have to start from the octave harmonic.
Then he starts to combine them into 2 octaves. And then also another fingering. A couple of options, not endless options, not to make it overwhelming. There are a ton of options you can do in terms of fingerings, of course, but just providing these 2 is a really nice balance and just opening your eyes to possibilities without just going bananas in terms of fingering.
I also tried to make it mistake-proof. Certainly in the notation of the fingerings, it's the same system that if there is a shift, it's written with a bold number, and if there's no shift, it's a regular font. Same with the string crossings. As my students taught me, I needed to be much more clear on the string crossing. So every string crossing is indicated with a bold letter, and a non-string crossing, a courtesy indication of a string, is going to be regular font.
But it's not just major. We get into natural minor scales, again taking the same approach. This book is going to do wonders for your sight reading and for your speed in learning music because, of course, probably obvious, but music is made up of scales and arpeggios, and the more you have these under your fingers, the faster you're going to be able to absorb new music. The perfect complement to Miraculous scales is Miraculous arpeggios. They are the same format and they move through the keys in the same sequence, and what you want to do for scales, you also want to do for arpeggios. I'm guilty of many things, but one is neglecting my arpeggio practice for sure. And so just making sure that I'm staying honest and going through my arpeggios in my key of the week is also great. And again, very similar, but now just with arpeggios instead of scales. And we also have the primer, which is this approach to the bass, but distilled down for younger bassists, for people new to the instrument.
The Miraculous scale fingerings, though they appear in 1 octave, 2 octave, and 3 octaves, the fingerings are too advanced for young players, and also maybe a little bit too physically demanding for young players. So I definitely felt the need to create something for our younger bass players. And I think that well, first off, the fingerings are much more standard. They're going to use the open string. They're going to use as few shifts as possible. But I think that it lays the foundation and the groundwork for the more professional Miraculous. scale fingerings. And the idea also is for a student to learn what is a melodic minor scale, what is a major arpeggio, what is a dominant seventh arpeggio. I think in particular regarding the arpeggios, pedagogically, sometimes those get neglected, especially among our young players. So I'm happy to present that not only as a technical or physical exercise, but also for them to learn the basics of music theory as well.
And Mark does something very wise. Even though in E major you do have all four sharps, whenever an accidental occurs, Mark writes a courtesy sharp or courtesy flat for the student. If you've ever taught young people, you find yourself writing those in a lot, so Mark just eliminated a lot of pencil lead or iPad pencil activity. These also use open strings. They're just the sort of thing that you do if you're starting out on bass. So for teachers of young students or people just getting started, this is the book. It is awesome. It is only 31 pages instead of hundreds of pages like the other books, but it's just the facts just to get you going with what you need to know. Still quite comprehensive, just staying in the lower part of the bass and not throwing people all up into thumb position like the main books.
All the books, but maybe the primary scale fingerings in particular, mistake-proof, is that I put in all the courtesy accidentals. For example, A major, every time a C comes up, well, there's going to be a sharp in front of it. Every time there's an F sharp or G sharp, those sharps are going to be right there, in addition to, of course, a more standard key signature in the front.